Hello again, baseball fans, and welcome into the MLB Draft Weekend Review for Week 3. We are officially 3 weeks into the college baseball season. Right now, I guess we can say it is the only baseball season. I think we can officially stop saying college baseball and just simply say baseball because it's the only baseball, it's the highest level of baseball that we are getting at this particular moment and quite possibly for the foreseeable future. So we appreciate you tuning in for Week 3 of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. I am your host, Chris Dunn, and as always, joined by my co-host, Joe Doyle. Joe, welcome to Week 3. I know that you were strapped, locked in, and ready to go for everything that was the Shriners Classic. But before we get into that, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Yeah, what a hell of a weekend on the baseball diamond. Had a lot of fun. It's nice seeing some of those top teams square off against one another.
For sure. So I guess before we get into the Shriners Classic, obviously that was the main attraction for this past weekend. 6 of the best schools, best teams in the country down at Minute Maid Park in Houston, battling it out over the weekend. But before we get into that, I guess you saw that the teams for next season's Shriner Classic were announced, correct? Any surprise, anything that you are super excited about based on that list of teams being Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Rice. What was the other one in Texas?
Louisville's in there.
Louisville, Michigan, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Rice. And TCU. Any one of those teams that you are really looking forward to based on draft, recruiting classes, anything like that you're looking forward to next season already?
Yeah, I think Louisville is the team that I kind of have circled. They're not quite as good this year as they've been in the past. At least it doesn't look that way on paper, but they've got some good prospects in Christian Knapczyk, and they've got a couple of outfielders that are going to be 2023 draft eligible that I'm excited to see kind of grow and develop. But I think Louisville is a team that might not have a ton of guys drafted this year, but they could see 4 or 5 guys drafted in the top 200 next year. So this should be a pretty good team.
All right. So we had a lot of big name, obviously some of the best schools in the country. Texas, the number 1 school in the country, was there. LSU looked at as having the best offense in the country, possibly the number 1 overall pick in this upcoming draft, and already arguably has the number 1 pick in next year's upcoming draft. Like, we're talking about an LSU offense here that might boast the number 1 overall selection 2 years in a row. And yet they're kind of overshadowed by Texas being the number 1 team in the country this weekend. What were your big takeaways from this weekend? And before we get into that, I'll just even throw up based on the position players, right? Like, let's start with the position players. Let's start with, that powerful LSU offense, and some of those guys and some of the prospects that were there. As you take a look here at the top hitting prospects that we had a chance to see, obviously the late game going on right now, but here's a look at the top prospects that were at the Shriners Classic this weekend, and what stands out to you about these guys. And was there anyone that, I guess, improved their stock significantly in your mind based on their performance this weekend?
Yeah, let's start with the guy at that did more for his stock this week, in my opinion, and in the opinion of some other folks that I talked to in the industry. Jordan Beck at Tennessee. That was one of the loudest tournament performances I have seen in quite some time. And I mean, at the end of the day, it was kind of fruitless. He ended up with 1 homer, but
hold on. Wait, he ended up with what?
He ended up with 1 homer.
Oh, he had 1 homer, but hold on. That 1 homer was pretty good.
About 6. This guy has just put the barrel on it about every at bat.
That one is launched in the air, deep left. Can he keep it fair? Yes, sir. A towering home run from Jordan Beck.
Yeah, 1 home run, but it was a moonshot.
Surprisingly, though, that ball was probably his 6th or 7th hardest hit ball of the weekend. Jordan Beck peppered the right center field warning track, which is deep in Minute Maid Park. I tweeted this earlier today. If Tennessee was playing in Knoxville this weekend against those talented arms, Jordan Beck would have had 6 home runs. He caught so many barrels. Donkey Kong would have been thrilled watching that baseball game. It was a lot, man. It was unbelievable. Yeah, Jordan Beck, man, just maybe the loudest hitter in the country right now, bar none. Some of the other guys I definitely want to talk about. I think Jacob Berry had a nice weekend, unspectacular, made a lot of contact, put the ball in play a whole bunch. Some lazy fly balls out to right center field, but at the end of the day, I mean, he did barrel up quite a few balls to center. Again, another guy that didn't find too many base hits, but looked good, looked the part. Nothing spectacular, I guess, is a better way of saying it. Peyton Graham looked really athletic. He's really impressed me 2 or 3 weeks in a row with his play at shortstop. I do think that he's got a chance of sticking at that position if he doesn't add the weight that everyone expects him to add too quick. He does have some swing and miss in his game. That's going to have to be, figured out as he gets into pro ball and as we work our way deeper into the spring. But the athlete that Peyton Graham is, we've probably all undersold it a little bit. K. Doty, again, was one of my 5 best hitters in the entire country this week. Coming into today's game, he was 7 for 12 with like 4 doubles and a home run this week. K. Doty, there's not much more he could do at the plate to improve his draft stock. He's definitely in that category right now of being a first round day 1 pick. McKenzie found some barrels. He's a little locked up right now at the plate, but I think he's going to open it up off to a little bit of a slow start. And Michael Curiali, I mean, I love the kid's swing. I really do. I think he's got a big future. Rolled over quite a few balls this week onto the infield. Found a couple of base hits, but yeah, I think the story here is Jordan Beck and Cade Doty just demolishing leather.
All right, so before we get into the pitchers, right? I want to look at this list and kind of go over, or just I guess ask you a question about anyone in particular here. Obviously, on the right-hand side of the graphic, you can see the current ranking on our top 3 on our Prospects Live top 300 2022 MLB draft prospects. So that ranking on the right-hand side is where they currently sit right now and where they have been throughout the beginning of this season. However, all of that is going to change. And Joe, all of that will change on Wednesday. On Wednesday, on Wednesday night, we're going to drop the top, not 300, but top 400 2022 MLB draft prospects list. And obviously that will be updated based on performances that we've seen so far this season. So with that kind of theme throughout tonight's show, with our upcoming top 400 prospects list, I'm going to ask you this question, not to give out too much, but looking at this list right here and where those guys are ranked right now, do you see anyone that might be taking a pretty big jump? Or do you see anyone that might, and you don't just, this is literally yes or no, not names, just yes or no, someone on this list is rising up a bit, or someone on this list is falling, list is falling a little bit?
Both. You're going to see, I mean, I'll give a little bit away. You're going to see a couple of these guys with pretty significant bumps, and you will see at least one of these guys falling, maybe not considerably, but falling a decent bump.
Okay. So you heard it here first, guys. I cannot, emphasize this enough. On Wednesday, the top 400 lists for the 2022 MLB draft will go live, and you'll be able to see where everyone ranks heading into the 2022 draft. It goes from 300 to 400. And you heard one of these guys on this list right here. Is it Jacob Berry, Jordan Beck, Peyton Graham, K. Doty? Like, these are some big name prospects. Somebody on this list, you just heard it here first from our Prospects Live director of the MLB draft. One of these guys might be making a bit of a slide, might be falling a little bit based on the performance so far this season. So we'll take that for what it is. Again, you'll be able to see the full top 400 on Wednesday. But we'll go ahead and we'll slide into the pitching performances and some of the top pitching prospects that were at the Shriners Classic this weekend. And Joe, what do you see from the likes of Chas Martinez, Jake Brooks? Obviously, Jake Brooks, we talked about him just last week with the performance that he had last week. And then also Oklahoma's lefty, Jake Bennett.
Yeah, so the first guy I'll talk about here is Bennett. We were pretty low on him in terms of the top 300 because the quality of strikes that he had thrown and the stuff that he had thrown didn't suggest a potential big league starter. I can say today that Jake Bennett is going to take a pretty substantial jump in the top 400. He's a guy that has been controlling his fastball to both sides of the plate. He's been throwing a ton of strikes. The slider has clearly taken a step forward, and he's beginning to use the changeup as more of a weapon and less of a get me over offering. It's a great body. He's a lefty. He's got starter traits. So just one of those guys that's really popped this year. And I think he's going to see his name well represented on Wednesday. And Jake Brooks is kind of a similar story from the other side. He's showing that he can control his fastball on the inner side, on the inner third of the plate to righties. He's able to dot the corner low and away glove side. The slider has clearly taken a step forward as well. Jake Brooks is a guy that has impressed. I'll be honest with you, at 214, I was actually probably a tick lower than that, but I was sold a little bit higher spot by some of our other evaluators. He's going to be taking a step forward. So both of those guys have looked very, very good. Chas Martinez, stuff has looked great. Stuff has looked like what we expected from Chas. The velo is down a little bit, but more than anything, it's just the command early on. He's not commanding the fastball as well as he usually could and should that we've seen in the past, especially what we saw in the fall. So Chas Martinez is a guy kind of nondescript, not moving in one direction or another, but certainly has shown the stuff that we want to see to keep an eye on him every Sunday moving forward.
All right. So you mentioned the performance of Jake Brooks, 8 innings pitched, just 3 hits. This is 2 weeks in a row now that we've seen Jake Brooks really step up. And as you mentioned, a little bit of a low grade, I guess, here, looking at him as the 214th ranked prospect. I think it goes without saying. I don't think this is breaking news. I don't think I'm giving away anything here by saying that, yeah, you can certainly expect a guy like Jake Brooks to move up on that top 400 when that top 400 is released on Wednesday. Anything else? Any concern, I guess, from any one of these guys, or maybe any concern from any other pitching prospects that, weren't in our top 300 from this past weekend's performance at the Shriners Classic? Were there any other guys that, maybe you didn't get to see enough of, or you would have liked to have seen a little bit more from, that are outside the top 300, or maybe even that aren't even in this upcoming draft class? Maybe some guys from the 2023 class that were on display, but obviously aren't, we're not going to spotlight as much here for the upcoming draft.
Yeah. I think the one guy that needs to be talked about, I think Thatcher Hurd. He's a 2024 freshman right-handed pitcher for UCLA. We watched this guy throw 3,000 RPM sliders and curveballs and turn over some changeups, and we watched him do it all summer last year. And everyone was waiting for him to get out of that 87 to 90 bucket. And, if the velo was going to spike, he was going to get paid. The velo never spiked. He was 87 to 90, touching 91. There's entire draft cycle. Well, now he's 93 to 95, 92 to 95 with a wicked slider. He's absolutely dominating every time he takes the bump. Sometimes he's starting on Sundays. This week he got in 5 outs, 1 2/3 innings, struck out all 5 batters that he faced. Thatcher Hurd has not only turned himself into, a dominant force right now as a 19-year-old, but potentially an option for the number 1 overall pick in 2024.
All right. And so moving away from the Shriners Classic and really just looking at the rest of the weekend, obviously we saw some great matchups. We saw Florida versus Miami. We saw Georgia versus Georgia Tech. You know what? Let's talk about Georgia versus Georgia Tech, because last week we were talking about the performance of Kevin Perrot, and I threw out that I think Kevin Perrot will be the first catching prospect selected in the draft. I went so far as to say that I think he'll be the first player from the ACC selected in the draft. What are your thoughts on this past weekend? Obviously, some tough pitching matchups he had, but he looked pretty good, right?
I mean, I would say Kevin Perrot looked absolutely dominant again. At last I checked, we hopped onto this call and I wasn't able to check again, but at last I looked, he was 3 for 3 again today with a walk. He had a 10 pitch at bat. Kevin Perrot is doing everything that you could ever add. Frankly, Kevin Perrot has been the best draft eligible bat in the country this year. Maybe with the exception of Orndorff at Liberty, but Liberty, kind of a different animal than Georgia Tech. Yeah. What Kevin Perrot is doing to Jonathan Cannon and some of these other top Georgia arms is simply sensational, and really excited to see if he can continue this on throughout the rest of the year. Because frankly, if he can, I mean, he's one of the best hitting prospect. He's probably the best hitting catching prospect since Adley Rutschman. It's been really explosive, man.
Are we talking about a player that could potentially, right? Like, we're so early in the season, but these are the types of questions that we have to ask ourselves and we have to think about, especially when we look back at the last few drafts and what the catching position has looked like. Is Kevin Perrot someone that could work his way into number 1 overall pick territory?
Yes.
No, without question.
Yeah. If the bat is so good. Listen, if you subscribe to the Spencer Torkelson model,
right,
of being the first overall pick, and granted, Kevin Perrot would have to go out and hit 360, 370 with 20 home runs, 22 home runs, strike out at 12%, walk at 12 or 14, 15%. Yeah, without a doubt. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you think the bat is so special that it is going to move through the minors so quickly, and you're going to be able to find a place on the diamond for him by the beginning of 2024, Kevin Perrot could absolutely go first overall, without question.
It's astonishing to me how we've seen with the catching position, just with Rutschman, and then with I don't remember a point in time where over a 4-year period, we would have seen already seen 2 and possibly 3 catchers being selected with the number 1 overall pick. I'm pretty sure you'd have to go all the way back to, 2008, when Buster Posey was the first overall catcher. Prior to Rutschman, I don't recall a catcher going number 1 overall.
Yeah, I mean,
prior to Buster Posey.
I mean, Joe Mauer went number 1 overall, but he was a high school catcher, and that was, I think, 2002 or 2004. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen very often. And these bats, I think it's incredible to see how much the bat has developed behind the plate, because, and at Georgia Tech, a lot of times they let them call their own games. So it's not like this guy is chopped liver behind the plate either.
Well, and let's give credit where credit is due. Also, Georgia Tech, like, there's just certain schools. We talked about Gonzaga last week, and how of late they've done a really good job of pumping out quality pitchers. There's just certain schools that do a really good job of pumping out talent at a particular position. And Georgia Tech, if I were to ask you who is Catcher University in the college
Georgia
baseball
Tech
ranks, it's right. I mean, we're talking Matt Wieters. Yeah, we're talking Wieters, Veritek,
Joey Bart.
Yeah, Joey Bart, right. Most recently, Joey Bart. So just a great job by Kevin Perrot, a great job by Georgia Tech. Really curious to see what he does once he gets into ACC play. I think that'll be the big that'll be a big test, sort of the litmus test for him once they get into ACC action. But obviously, I want to get into some questions, because we're getting a couple questions in the chat. And one of the things that we really want to emphasize on this show is giving you guys the opportunity to get your questions out there for us so that we can address those right away, immediately. And so first question I want to ask here comes from Cubs Central, and it's centered on, I assume centered on the top 400 list that will drop on Wednesday. And so again, we will go throughout this show and we will tease a little bit about that top 400 list because it's a really big deal. One, it's gaining from 300 to 400, but also it's going to be updated, and you're going to see some guys that are rising quite a bit. You're going to see some guys that drop quite a bit. So Cub Central here wants to know, what college arm is the fastest riser at this point? Joe, I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm going to throw this one to you, and then I'm going to tell you whether or not my guess to your answer was correct or not. Who do you have as the fastest riser so far?
So I'm not sure on the exact numbers, but I would have to imagine Adam Mazer at Iowa is going to be, if not the guy, near the top. I'm trying to pull up where he was. So Adam Mazer in our top 300 was ranked number 184. And that was because we had him 90 to 94, up to 95 with a two-seamer, command issues, and a really good breaking ball. For us, that was a guy that potentially didn't have starter traits, was struggling a little bit on the Cape to throw strikes and to throw strikes, quality strikes at South Dakota State. He has been absolutely dynamic. The fastball's been up to 97. The breaking ball, he's got two breaking balls. They've both been graded out flashing plus, filling up the strike zone, really quick arm. He's more physical than he was on the Cape. Adam Mazer has gone from, I mean, if he was 184, he's now right on the precipice, fringe day one.
So you're not even talking like top 100. You're talking even inside,
talking top 50.
well inside, top 50.
Top 50.
So that's a big jump. I would have to imagine. So Mazer was my guess. Obviously, we've, having talked about him quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, Mazer was my guess. So I guess I'm not super surprised by your answer there, but I guess I am a little bit surprised based on the fact that we're talking about a jump of potentially 100 plus, right? I mean, you're talking possibly inside the top 50 city from 189. I mean, that's.
But I think the most important thing is, I mean, you're going to see guys on this list that jump from unranked into the top 200. Okay, you're going to see guys that jump on this list from the 250 to 300 range into that 100 range.
Right.
But it's much more difficult, in my opinion, to jump from anywhere on the list, especially outside of the top 100, and into the day one category, because there are tiers, and it's a pyramid. It's very tough to get up into that top, I guess if you want to call it 5% of prospects that we think have first round day one helium. Right. And Adam Mazer has gone from what we initially graded as a 5th round type of talent, late 4th round type of talent, all the way up to kind of a 50-50 shot at being taken in the first round. And, I just want to say kudos to the University of Iowa. When he selected Iowa, I said, wow, he's got so many offers. He can go anywhere he wants. Iowa isn't exactly a breeding ground for developing pitching. I mean, the Hawkeyes have turned this kid into a beast. So Adam Mazer, shout out to you.
Yeah, and I just want to take what you said a step further. You're 100% correct. It is a significantly greater accomplishment and achievement, and it's worth noting a lot more, and it carries a lot more weight when a guy who is ranked 50 jumps into the top 15, right, or top 10, even though that's only a jump of 35 or 40 spots potentially. It's a much bigger deal when a guy who's at 50 jumps inside the top 10 versus a guy who's 175 jumping inside the top 100 when that's a potential jump of 80 or 90 or 100 spots. Like, it's a much bigger deal. And I'm glad that you said that, because I think a lot of times people look at these lists, right? These lists come out, and the first thing that you look at is who jumped the most, who's the guy that has increased his draft stock, who's the guys who has the biggest gain in value. And a lot of times that's what people look at. And those are the guys that people target if you're talking about a dynasty league or whatever, because you want to try to get the jump on a guy who's unknown, I guess, if you will. And clearly, if you're outside of our top 300 right now, those are the guys that are probably unknown. Even, guys that are outside the top 100 at this point are probably unknown. And even in a wide open, if you're talking about fantasy purposes, even in a wide open universe, most of the guys aren't, that well known. And so a lot of times people gravitate towards, the green arrow, right? If you will.
Yeah, it's a trajectory play is huge.
Yeah, they just want to see the guy that's bumping up. And so it's really important to kind of look at those guys that are making the jump that weren't in the top 10 or 15 into the top 10 or 15, because those are the guys that, might be there to stay. Any other takeaways from this week? Obviously, we talked a bunch about the Shriners, Kevin Perrot, Georgia. What, anything from Miami and Florida? I know I saw a question in the chat here a little bit earlier, asking about who was it about Carson Palmquist at Miami.
Yeah.
Anything?
Palmquist has looked good. He's been solid. I think in talking with area guys down in that area, the thing that people want to see Palmquist do as we move into the spring, and this is totally doable. He had more velo last year in a relief role, and that's to be expected, right? I mean, if you're in a relief role, you're going to be able to give more effort in every pitch. The velo has been down from what it was as a starter last year, but also it's March. I mean, guys are still warming up. So if Palmquist sees his velocity spike a little bit, I think he's definitely in play for round one.
It's weird to say that in March, guys that are in Miami have
really
to
not
warm
fair.
up still. I mean,
for anyone, like it's really not fair to even say, velo is a concern, because you see these guys really start to amp up at the end of April.
So speaking of concern and velo, and I know we're going to get into this a little bit more, but how about this past weekend in terms of the injuries that we've seen?
Yeah.
Right. I know that this was a tough weekend. I think this season to begin with, we headed into the season and there was quite a bit of injuries. And then this past weekend alone, we saw a couple more notable injuries to significant pitching prospects. And so what do you have? I know there's a lot of people out there that want to know the latest on Landon Sims, and they want to know the latest on Adam Meyer and what's going on with those guys. And I haven't seen anything. Maybe you know a little bit more than I do, Joe. I haven't seen any news other than the fact that Landon Sims, it doesn't look good, right? He's probably I'm going to.
Well, I don't want to speak anything into the, any energy out there. But in an interview with Will Clark today, who's a Mississippi State alum, San Francisco Giants, all timer, Landon Sims did say he felt a pop in his arm, and then he felt tingling go into his fingers. So you never want to assume, but it certainly doesn't sound good for Landon Sims. It would be a huge hit to this 2022 draft class if he were to miss extended time and have to go under the knife. Adam Meyer, a little bit of the same, felt a little bit of a pull, some tingling, according to people close to that organization, that program. So yeah, I mean, Adam Meyer is a big loss. We had him as a second round value. He hasn't quite been as sharp as we were expecting him to be, and this injury certainly hurts a lot. So you throw Sims and Meyer on top of Prelip and Crawford and Peyton Pallette and Carson Wisenhunt's disciplinary things. It doesn't sound like, I mean, this shouldn't be a shock to any people, but it doesn't sound like Carson Wisenhunt is going to pitch this year. There's a very good chance he's not going to pitch this year. And then Blade Tidwell's shoulder, there's just a lot of unknowns with Blade Tidwell. So yeah, and to add on, I mean, 2023 potential top 5, top 10 pick Tanner Witt out of Texas today gets his start in the Shriners Classic pulled for precautionary reasons. That doesn't mean anything. You don't know what that means, but it has just been an absolutely devastating year for college pitching. And I wrote about this, on Friday night after the Sims injury, and I dug back and researched every single draft class. And there's a chance that this is going to be the fewest college pitchers taken in the first round in 50 years, since 1971. 1971 and 2018, there were 4 college pitchers taken. That's the least amount ever since 1971, 1972. This year, I could absolutely see 2 or 3. I still, if it's worst case scenario with Landon Sims, I still think he's going to be a first round pick. Gunnar Hoagland was a first round pick last year when he popped for Ole Miss in late April. I still think Landon Sims is a first round pick. But then you go down the list and you kind of just look like, who are you paying $4 million to in this class when there's so much good high school pitching as an alternative? So we'll see what happens. I genuinely hope some of these guys, Blade Tidwell and Landon Sims, Adam Meyer, I hope they're okay.
So you talk about dating back all the way to the 70s, which is crazy because I wasn't even born then, right? We're talking about, is this potentially the worst group of college pitchers heading into the draft in my entire lifetime? Right? Like, that's such a strong statement, but I don't know that, again, and I'll just pull up the graphic again, looking at some of these names here. I mean, these are all of
I don't
these
think it's
guys
the worst.
These are all potential first, second round picks. I mean, any one of these, a couple of these guys could have been the first college pitcher selected in the draft.
I mean, these are all first round talents. Peyton Graham was in our top 20. Blade Tidwell is currently in our top 20. Connor Prelip was number 1 on a ton of boards before he got injured. Landon Sims was in our top 15. Kumar Rocker, if you want to put him into that bucket, was in our top 5 last year, and he's in this class, but nobody knows if he's going to throw. Right. Do I think is it the worst college class ever? No, I don't think you can say that. I mean, the worst college, a lot of people think that the worst college pitching class in recent memory, if you go back in recent memory, 2019, you had George Kirby, you had Nick Lodolo, you had Alek Manoah, and I'm trying to remember who the other guy was. But it wasn't on draft day. It wasn't considered an especially strong class. Those guys have all panned out. George Kirby is a top 15 prospect. Nick Lodolo is a top, 30 prospect at a lot of publications. Alek Manoah was dynamite last year in the pros. So I think time will tell whether or not this class is going to, be quote unquote bad. But I do think it's quite possibly the most unlucky. I mean, I think you have to start throwing that sort of label on it right now. It's fragile.
Fragile to say the least. I mean, these aren't good. Zach Thompson, are you thinking about maybe? He was selected 19th overall out of Kentucky.
Yep.
Right ahead of George Kirby, like you said it.
Yeah. So that's panned out. I mean, a lot of people thought that might have been the worst college class in recent, in the last 20 years. But those guys have turned out to be extremely good pitching prospects. So sometimes it's just in the eye of the beholder, and it takes time.
Yeah, don't tell Mariners fans that their first round draft pick in 2019 is a bust, and don't tell Blue Jays fans that their first round pick was a wasted pick either. I
think the question might be, is this going to be regarded as the weakest college pitching class in the last 20, 30 years? I would say there's a reasonable chance that at least on draft day, comparatively speaking, people might feel as though this is the weakest college pitching class in, since I've been alive, 30 years.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because yes, all of this is subjective and all of this has everything to do with what they did and what they're doing prior to the draft, and nothing to do with what they're going to do after the draft and moving forward, after they get selected by whoever they get selected by. And so I think that is where you really need to emphasize that we can sit here and we can talk about this draft class and how the injuries have been a huge deal, and that when it comes to a college pitching perspective, the name cachet, if you will, like the recognition might not quite be there of some of the other years or some of the years that we've seen in the past. But does that mean, I guess I'll pose this from the college versus high school angle, because this is something that's often discussed on draft day. Do you think that there's going to be a run on high school pitching prospects early on, given the fact that, one, the college group might not be as good as expected or as good as scouts want to be, and the injury history, right? Like we just saw a bunch of no doubt first round talents that are coming off of injury. And so I guess I assume we're going to see more high school pitchers taken in the first round than we are college pitchers. I don't think that's a stretch, but I guess how many high school pitchers, let me just ask you, how many high school pitchers do you think will be selected before the first college pitcher is selected in the draft?
My guess would be 3 right now, maybe 4. I think Dylan Lesko's a lock to go before any other pitcher. Brandon Barriera, I would put pretty high confidence that he and Jackson Ferris are both going to go before a college pitcher. And then you look at guys like Brock Porter and Tristan Smith and J.R. Ritchie and Noah Schultz and Cole Phillips, Andrew Dukanic. I mean, the high school pitching class this year is so unbelievably loaded at the top that, I mean, I could see as many as 6 high school arms going before the first college arm. I don't think it'll end up being that high, but yeah, this is it's kind of a perfect storm for the narrative that you've laid out, because it's such a loaded high school pitching class that those teams that want pitching but have some concerns about the college class, there's just so many options on the high school side that, take your pick.
You mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I think it's worth bringing up because he was such a polarizing name last year heading into the draft, pretty much throughout the entire season. And it's a name that a lot of people might be forgetting about, but you brought him up when we were talking about these college arms and the injury. And you mentioned Kumar Rocker. And
yeah,
I think it's worth talking about Kumar Rocker. And I see Mike Furr, excuse me if I'm botching your name here, Mike. I believe it's Mike Furr. Does anyone know what Rocker is doing? He's playing an independent ball, right? But do we have Rocker ranked pretty high. We'll see what that looks like on Wednesday when the top 400 drops. But right now, I believe we have Rocker. I'm pulling it up here. We've got Rocker at number 24 overall in the top 300. Do you what's your take on Rocker right now? And is there anything that he can really do to vault his draft status? Yes.
Without question. What
does he have to do?
I would actually go as far as to say there are things he needs to do to buoy his draft status. We have him at 24 right now under the expectation that Kumar Rocker is going to provide his medicals to teams pre-draft and that he's going to at least throw some innings in independent ball. He's not confirmed either. Nobody's heard a peep out of his medicals. Nobody's heard anything out of the Boris camp. So I don't think we are going to hear anything about Kumar Rocker until probably May. And then when that happens, I think he'll probably throw a few bullpen showcases. And I think he'll probably get in, 2-3 games with an independent league. And he'll probably throw 1 or 2 innings in each of those instances. But you're talking about a guy that, suffice to say, I think it's a shoulder ailment. I haven't heard that, but I do think that if it was a forearm or an elbow, the Mets would have signed him. So we have him at 24 with the expectation he's going to provide some insight into where he's at. If he goes the same route that he did in 2021, he could go to the second round.
So then I guess if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, there's a greater chance that he slides down this list than he moves up this list.
I don't know, because he's such an enigma. He's such a mystery. Here's the thing. And we kind of said this last week, Kumar Rocker, betting against Kumar Rocker seems silly because at his best, it's a double plus fastball. It's a double plus slider. It's a pro starter body. You put those two things together and he should be a top 10 pick. And if he comes out in a bullpen and showcases in front of scouts that he's still 98, 97 and 98, he's still got the breaking ball and he's willing to throw all of his pitches and he looks healthy, I could see him skyrocketing again. But if he leaves a shadow of a doubt in his health, he could go the other direction. So if, we said this last week, he's the X factor. Kumar Rocker has every opportunity to go in the top 10, top 15. he has every opportunity to fall outside of the top 50. It's really just a matter of what he can prove between now and July to area scouts.
All right. And last question here on the Rocker thing before we move forward, because we are crazily enough flying through the show tonight.
Yeah.
Is there a chance? I think this is a curious. I'm really interested to hear your response on this. Is there a chance Kumar Rocker is the first pitcher selected that is not a high school pitcher? Could Kumar Rocker go ahead of? Could Kumar Rocker get selected ahead of all other college pitching arms?
Yes, I still think he could, because I still think he's a top 10 talent. There are teams that are out on Kumar Rocker because of the way 2021 was handled. But there's a lot of teams that still like that talent. And if he shows that he's still in good shape and he shows that he's worth the money, he could still go top 10, top 15. And if I'm willing to say that Kumar Rocker will go top 10 or could go top 10, top 15, and we're talking about the potential of, 1 or 2 college pitchers going in the first round. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely put it this way. Kumar Rocker in 2021 is a whole bucket above the prospect that Landon Sims is currently, just with everything we know. It's just going to be a matter of, is he healthy?
Right. Forget about the health issues, just on talent and what we've seen alone. And even if Kumar Rocker were to fall, even if Kumar Rocker was a late first round pick and he went 22nd, 23rd, 24th, something like that, that could still be a steal, but that could still be the first non-high school pitcher selected, right? I mean,
it could absolutely.
Who knows what we're going to see with all these injuries and everything. So we don't have the luxury of the top 25, right? Obviously, the top 25 will be released on Monday. And so having to bump the show up to Sunday night rather than its normal time slot on Monday. And we will go back to our normal 9 p.m. Eastern time slot on Monday next week for week 4. So for those of you that are super excited about the show being on a Sunday, I do apologize in advance. Next week, it will go back to Monday. And for those of you that are looking for us tomorrow night, wondering why we're not, you can catch the archive. It'll be on YouTube. Don't worry, you're not going to miss much. Your friends might spoil something for you that they got to see live that you didn't get to see because you weren't paying attention and you weren't following either Joe or myself or Prospects Live. And you know what? If you're not following any one of us, well, then that's on you. And I guess I don't really feel all that bad for you. So we don't have the luxury of the upcoming top 25, but we do have the luxury of looking back, and we have the luxury of hindsight, right? And so what are your expectations for the top 25 that gets released tomorrow? And as we go into this, I'll pull up the top 25 from this past week, the current top 25, if you will. As you see here, obviously Texas gets their first loss of the season. They're no longer undefeated. Are they in any danger, Joe, of losing that number 1 spot? I certainly don't think so, but could we see Texas drop?
Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think that Texas has shown anything to suggest that they're not the number 1 team in the country. I do think that you could make the argument that Tennessee is one of the top 5 teams in the country. So, I mean, we have them or D1 Baseball has them at number 17. I have a hard time saying that they're not better than, I don't know. They're definitely going to go into the top 10. I think they're better than Mississippi State and NC State, and I think they're better than Stanford. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But Tennessee, for me, is going to be the largest jump. They were extremely impressive, both on the mound and at the plate. I mean, that Tennessee lineup might be just as good, if not better, than the Texas lineup or the LSU lineup.
Yeah, and so it's funny because last week I posed the question to you when we went over this top 25 for the first time, and I asked you, of the undefeated teams that were not Texas, Ole Miss, right up there at the top, really, I was looking at the likes of NC State, Oregon State. We brought up Georgia, but it seems like Tennessee is that team out of that entire group that it has vaulted themselves the most. And maybe some of that has to do with the fact that they did it on the big stage, if you will, this past weekend, being the Shriners Classic, games being broadcast on MLB Network. But certainly this Tennessee team looks really, really good. Is there anyone in this list? Let's look at the top. Let's look at the top 15 here, top 10 to 15. Is there anyone in that 10 to 15 range that you could see sliding a little bit based on their performance this past weekend?
Yeah, I think NC State might fall a little bit. I just, when Tommy White isn't crushing the baseball, I wonder if they have enough offense in that lineup. It's a good offense. I don't think it's on the same level as some of the teams that it's surrounding or that are surrounding their name in the top 8. So, personally, I would have NC State outside of the top 15. And I think it's been a pretty tough little stretch here for Arizona. I'm not sure whether or not they fit in the top 15. Some of the teams on the outside looking in, though, Liberty looks really good. I know that it wasn't a perfect weekend for them, but they really have a pretty solid team top to bottom. They do a lot of things really well. So we'll see what happens with Liberty. And then Oregon State had another good weekend. They took 2 out of 3 against UC Irvine, and UC Irvine's got a lot of good arms. So I might expect Oregon State to bump up a little bit as well.
All right. So one team that I could certainly envision, maybe bumping up a little bit or certainly staying where they are, which is a bit of a shock to a lot of people. What about this Sacramento State team, Joe?
Yeah, Sacramento State, I believe, lost 2 out of 3.
Oh, they did lose 2 out of 3. Okay, I thought they won 2 out of 3. Okay.
I could be mistaken, so I don't have it pulled up in front of me. I think they lost 2 out of 3, and if that's the case, being at number 23, I would expect them probably to fall out of the top 25.
They'll fall. The only reason they were there to begin with is because they were undefeated, right? I mean, Eli Saul, great performance week 2, sort of carried them a little bit. But we did get a great performance from Cesar Valero, right? I mean, that
Cesar Valero was probably the best bat in the country this week.
Best bat in the country?
Yeah, so I mean, I can pull up his numbers, but it was, I know he went 5 for 5 with a walk on the first day with 3 home runs.
So it looks like he went 6 for 9. 6 for 9, 5 runs scored, 10 RBIs.
Yeah, it was extremely loud. Cesar Valero was incredibly impressive for Sacramento State. And he's an Oregon State transfer. So, never doubt this kid's ability. Cesar Valero can play, and he's been able to play going back to his high school days. He just didn't have an opportunity to do it for the Beavs. And there's a reason that he's kind of anchoring that Sacramento State lineup behind Jorge Borges.
So I guess let me ask you this question. What's better? Valero going 6 for 9 with 10 RBIs.
Well, Dom Keegan probably.
So that's hey, come on, let me ask the question, Joe. You don't even let me ask the question. It's like the question.
Well, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming because, I don't know what Dom Keegan did today, but he was 9 for 10.
Who goes 9 for 10, Joe?
Yeah, 9 for 10 with 3 homers. Dom Keegan he's a man among boys, and I feel bad for what he did to Hawaii, but it's Hawaii. Hawaii's not a bad program, but it's not the pitching that he is accustomed to seeing.
Look, it's never good when pitchers hang a curveball, but it seems like Dom Keegan was hanging 10, mashing balls in Hawaii this past week.
Keegan hit a few balls back to the Continental 48.
He did. One of them landed in California. It's fine. Anyone else on this list? Any team that you think could make a jump at any point in here? Obviously, I would imagine Georgia might slide a little bit. Certainly, I would anticipate Georgia Tech moving ahead of Georgia potentially.
Yeah. Georgia Chance Huff has been pretty lights out, and Zach Maxwell's throwing more strikes than he's ever thrown. It'll be interesting to see kind of where things shake out in that 10 to 20 range, because I think there's a lot of variability. You can move a lot of teams up and down in there. Florida is a team that's really interesting too. Judd Fabian seems to be figuring it out at the right time. I know it wasn't the greatest competition, but he looks like the Judd Fabian that a lot of people want to see, and they've got arms. It's just a matter of whether or not those arms can throw enough strikes and keep the ball out of the middle of the plate. So Florida, they're a team that could certainly shoot up into the top 10, top 5 if they get on a little bit of a roll.
All right, so I feel like we can't go through an entire show without getting some sort of update on the number 1 ranked prospect in college baseball, who goes by the name of Chase DeLauder. And even when I don't really have anything to say about it, and we didn't really talk about it too much, leave it to the audience to pose the question, or at least the request of us, if you will, to talk about Chase DeLauter and how he's looked. And yeah, he didn't look great in the opening weekend against Florida State, but he's looked good of late. And so Santee City begs the question, what sort of weight do you carry with Chase DeLauter performing poorly, I guess, against really good competition, but then performing really well against lesser known competition? Is that a big deal? Does that matter?
Yeah, and we even had another Christy in our comments had another question for an update on Chase DeLauter. So an interesting little thing about DeLauter, he missed most of this weekend. He actually got hit in the head with a pitch in his second at bat on Friday. He missed Saturday. I have not checked in on whether or not he played on Sunday, but he did have some concussion symptoms. Got hit in the head. He actually went out into the field after getting hit in the head, and he ran into the wall really hard in the next half inning. So they pulled him, and that was it. To answer Santee City's question, I've said this in past shows. I thought that the matchup against Florida State was an opportunity and not a disqualifier. Did he take the opportunity to plant his flag as the best college hitter in this class? No. But has he done so much damage that he's not one of our, top, I'm just going to say top ranked players in this class? Absolutely not. The fact that he's pummeled everyone that's gotten in his way since that Florida State matchup, I think says a lot. The kid can hit.
Yeah, I mean, look, we were talking about overreaction Monday, right? When he didn't perform well against Florida State, and a lot of people were saying, his stance, his swing, the back leg sliding out. Oh my God, this is an issue. Like it's not something that was new for him. I think more than anything, what was new was the amount of eyes that were watching him and now criticizing him. And when he doesn't perform well over the course of a 3-game stretch, everyone wants to turn around and be like, why was this guy looked at as the number one prospect? I can look at him and see he's struggling. He had, 8 strikeouts, and he just doesn't look like there's so much more criticism that comes with being looked at as a potential first overall pick and even just a top 5 or top 10 pick. It almost isn't fair. No matter what Chase DeLauter does at any point, there's
people are going to look for reasons to pull him off the mantle.
Right. And maybe one of those reasons is what Santee City said and is alluding to. He doesn't play against regular competition. And I remember watching that Florida State series, and I said this, I was like, it's unfortunate that he's not playing well right now, because people are going to remember this when he doesn't get a chance to play any top schools the rest of the season. And all people are going to remember is in the one opportunity he had against big time competition, he struggled. And it's unfair. It's unfortunate. And it's like, we've completely forgotten. And I say people have completely forgotten how good he looked on the Cape. And the Cape is made up of all of the best talented players. So it's just ridiculous. And I think you're 100% right. People are going to find a reason to poke holes and nitpick. And that's what happens when you're looked at as a number 1 or 2 or 3, or anyone who's inside the top 5 or top 10.
Couldn't agree more.
Other question we have here for the top 400. Again, guys, the top 400 prospects will drop on Wednesday. And so we're doing a little bit of some teasing for that. I do see another question that came through here in the chat, and that is about Gonzaga right-hander Gabriel Hughes. Question here from Gamers 2.0. Is he a top 400 riser? Well, I don't know if you can call him a top 400 riser. We're talking about Hughes, who's already well established inside the top 50. We had him currently right now at 35.
Yeah. So I'm fairly certain going into the college season that we were the high publication on Gabe Hughes. I mean, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I've seen Gabriel Hughes throw twice. I'm going to see him again here in about 3 weeks. Yeah, I mean, he's number 35 on our list right now. I don't know where he's going to be on the top 400. I can't pull it up right now, but he's certainly not falling. He's looked dynamic. He's been up to 97. The breaking ball has been nasty. Nolan McLean hit an absolute mammoth tank off of him this weekend. But besides that, I think he had like 10 or 11 strikeouts over 7 innings, gave up a run or two. Yeah, Gabriel Hughes is doing everything that he needs to do to stay exactly where he is. And he's another guy that certainly fits potentially on day one in the draft if he continues this up.
So we've got the top 400 dropping on Friday, guys. We've got, not Friday, on Wednesday. We've got about 5 minutes left in the show here tonight. So we're going to really open it up here for any questions that you guys might have on that top 400. Obviously, we're not going to give away any rankings. We're not going to go into great detail. But if you do have any questions about the top 400 prospects, maybe a particular player, do you think that he's on the way up, on the way down, or just anything, we will talk a little bit about that top 400, and we'll try to answer the questions as best we can without leaking too much information. And I guess all that being said, we'll throw one up here. Here's a question from THP Knob. What a fantastic, I guess so far, 3 weeks into the show, I guess this might be the best handle we have so far, the Knob. How do you feel about Chris McIlvaine, Joe?
Yeah, so I can tell you Chris McIlvaine will be not only on our top 400 board, he's going to be inside the top 300, maybe quite a bit better than that. He's been impressive. I did not expect the level of dominance, if you want to say it, from Chris McIlvaine. Been up to 95. He's been sitting 92 to 93. Sliders looked good. He can turn over a changeup. I think Chris McIlvaine has surprised a lot of people this year. Do I think he is ultimately a top end type of guy? Right now, I say no. The stuff doesn't look to me like a top 2-round pick, but if the velo continues to tick up like it has, this has not been where Chris McIlvaine has pitched in the past. The sky is the limit, but he's been polished. He's looked a lot better than a lot of people expected.
Ooh, so here's one. I think I might be pushing the threshold a little bit here in terms of questions that we are willing to answer. So I'm not going to answer this. I'm going to give you, Joe, the opportunity to either confirm or deny this one right here.
Yeah, Brandon Eek will be in the top 400. Brandon Eek will be in the top 400. Brandon Eek was in our top. I want to say he finished last year in our top 400. He's draft eligible for the second time. I like Brandon Eek a lot, and the stuff has been good. The stuff has been up there. He had some durability concerns last year, but yeah, you'll see Eek in the top 400.
I appreciate the question, Justin Rifkin. If there's any more questions, we've got a few minutes left here. We've got about 3 minutes before we get out of here. Again, guys, stay tuned. Wednesday, we will drop the top 400 draft prospects for this upcoming draft. But even before then, too, I think it's also worth, I would be remiss if we went through this entire show and I didn't mention the fact that tomorrow, if you're looking for something to read, if you're looking for some filler material throughout your workday tomorrow, the top 100 prospects, the top 100 major league prospects will drop tomorrow at Prospects Live. So be sure to check that out. You'll be able to see the top 100. Yeah, we don't have an end in sight, or I should say a start in sight to the major league season, but certainly no shortage of content. prospectslive.com. For as little as $5, you guys can even get bonus content by subscribing, becoming a subscriber to the Patreon page. We greatly appreciate that. I believe, Joe, what was last count? We were up for
over 3,000.
Over 3,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Truly appreciate each and every one of you.
Or excuse me, I'm sorry. It's over 500 subscribers.
Okay.
My fault.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, 3,000. That seems a lot higher than what
500, but we're ticking up towards 3,000.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Maybe through the growing popularity of the show, we can get to 3,000. But right now, just over 500. We do truly appreciate all the support from you guys. But again, the top 100 Major League Prospects list will drop tomorrow. Top 400 draft prospects will be on Wednesday. Joe, is there any chance, here's a question, another one from Mike, for any shot of Brooks Lee? I know you had a chance to watch him a little bit this weekend. We saw his second home run of the season. Any chance Brooks Lee jumps into that conversation of being the first overall player selected?
Yeah, without question, especially with Mike Elias at the helm in Baltimore. They're always, I don't want to say looking for a discount, but they're looking for extraordinary ways to stretch their draft bonus pool. Brooks Lee, for my money, has been the best college hitter in baseball. He's got 1 strikeout in 54 plate appearances. He hit his second home run of the year with 9 doubles already. And Cal Poly's playing good schools. Cal Poly is technically the little school that is playing up to these big schools early on here. So he's hitting some pretty good arms. I think folks will be, I'll tease it a little bit. I think folks will be reasonably excited when they see where he lands on the top 400.
Excited where Brooks Lee lands on the top 400?
Yeah. I'm not going to say 1-1, but he's well represented.
Okay. Because he's at number 4 right now, guys. If you didn't catch up on what Joe's teasing at here, he's number 4 right now. So if you're going to be excited about a guy,
he's still in the top 4.
Clearly he's not going down, right? Obviously you're not going to get excited about the guy that drops from 4 down. So it remains to be seen where Brooks Lee falls, where he lands on Wednesday. You'll find out. Is Brooks Lee the number 1 prospect? He might be. Can Chase DeLauder hold on to that number 1 spot? A lot of detractors will say he didn't perform well against Florida State. That's fine. Is that enough to knock him from the number 1 overall spot? Will we see someone like Drew Jones? Look, we are definitely not going to get out of this show without talking about Drew Jones and what we've seen from him. And I guess, Joe, let's just roll the footage. I don't even know what to say, but we can talk briefly about, I want to get this. We can talk briefly about Drew Jones here. That is the viral shot heard around the world, if you will.
Yeah. So
and shout out to Hofer.
Congrats to Will Hofer. Yeah. Getting the shot of his life. 3 million views on Twitter in like 2 days. Pretty unbelievable footage there from Will. So shout out to Hill. Drew has done everything that a scout would ever want to see in terms of the top prospects in baseball, the top prospects in amateur baseball. He looks the part. He's got the lineage. It's impossible not to like Drew Jones right now.
Yeah, there's a lot to like. I guess before we get out of here, last thing we'll do real quick, looking at the top. So for those of you that are waiting with bated breath, right now, the top 5 prospects in our top 300, Chase DeLauder's in at number 1. Drew Jones is in at number 2. Chase Young at 3, Brooks Lee, as we talked about, at 4. And you heard Joe, you heard him here say it. He's going to remain inside the top 4. And if you were listening closely, you may have hinted on him saying he's moving up from that 4 spot. Elijah Green, we've certainly seen plenty of him to warrant possibly moving up in that top 5. And we'll even go a little bit further. Tamar Johnson was in at 6. Daniel Susak was 7. Dylan Lesko, who you mentioned, might be the first pitcher selected in the upcoming draft. Brock Jones, the outfielder at Stanford, was 9. And then Jacob Berry at LSU is number 10. That is what the top 10 is right now. But again, guys, on Wednesday, the top 400, not 300, the top 400 will drop. So we will have all of that for you. And then, Joe, I guess, next week, we will be able to take a lot of questions on that top 400 update. In addition to, the week that was in week 4, I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions on that top 400.
Yeah. Getting close to mock draft season too. So that's something you can kind of keep your eyes out for maybe this month.
Yeah. So there you go. Something else to look forward to. We got top 100 prospects on Monday, top 400 draft prospects for the 2022 class on Wednesday, and just a lot to look forward to. So that's going to do it for week 3. Joe, appreciate the time. Appreciate you as always coming on. Exciting week 4 coming up. The Shriners Classic is in the past. We saw some good performances. We saw some, forgettable performances over the weekend as well. So Again, guys, be sure to check out prospectslive.com throughout the day tomorrow for that top 100 major league prospects. But then also on Wednesday, be on the lookout for the top 400 draft eligible prospects. For my co-host, Joe Doyle, I am Chris Dunn, signing off on a special Sunday night edition of the MLB Draft Weekend Review. We'll be back next week on Monday. It's normal scheduled 9 p.m. Eastern time for the MLB Draft Weekend Review for week 4. Until then, take care, everybody. Have a good night.